Environmental impact of NFTs. This video will teach you about a topic that no one wants to discuss, the environmental effect of non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. We investigate the carbon footprint of blockchain technology in depth, breaking out every watt-hour of energy required in the processing of NFTs from creation to sale. We made this video to present a true, unbiased viewpoint based on a recent study with the goal of sparking a well-informed debate. Welcome to NFT Godly. In this channel, we help crypto enthusiasts such as yourself learn more about crypto so they can make better investment decisions without taking on too much risk. We do this through these videos, so be sure to subscribe and turn on bell notifications for future uploads. Before we begin, there are a few things you should be aware of. NFTs, in a nutshell, are a method of verifying real ownership of a digital asset by attaching a unique key to it through a process known as minting. When an NFT is issued, ownership data is maintained on a blockchain network, and whoever began the minting process is given the key that unlocks the block's ownership data. When you purchase an NFT, you are purchasing the only verified version of the item. This naturally raises its value because the object is unique in contrast to its non-NFT replicas. Blockchain technology consumes power, and data is saved on the blockchain, and blocks are reviewed by miners using the proof of work process to gain consensus on the transaction's integrity. This technique is responsible for blockchain technology's strong security and decentralized nature. However, the continual data checks use up processing power. Regular blockchain usage, such as cryptocurrency trading, necessitates only two actions: currency in registration and currency out registration. In the case of NFTs, numerous blockchain data blocks are added, which demands more power than usual usage. To put it simply, all NFT data is greater in size than ordinary transaction data. This raises the possibility that the power consumption and hence carbon footprint for merely NFTs is out of balance. What precisely is a carbon footprint? According to Chapter 1 Carbon Footprint Calculation, a carbon footprint is the total of all carbon emissions emitted throughout the manufacturing and usage of a product. When addressing carbon footprint, we normally refer to an estimate. When it comes to assessing the carbon footprint of NFTs, there are multiple steps in the process that have no carbon imprint, and there are relatively few scholarly peer-reviewed articles on the subject. As a result, calculating the carbon footprint of producing an NFT is complicated, and for the time being, it is based on guesses. Let's take a closer look at the procedure for NFTs that employ Ethereum. To manufacture or mint an NFT, a few things must occur. The token must be validated as a commodity on the blockchain at the time of minting, and the owner's account balance must be modified to reflect the addition of that commodity. This allows it to be swapped or leased verifiably in the future. The aforementioned transactions must be included in a block on the blockchain. For all miners to agree that the block is valid, they must use the proof of labor process. Miners are in charge of all of these duties, and the proof of work method notifies the whole Ethereum network about the NFT's current ownership status. This means that mining must be sufficiently calculated, or else the proof of work system will fail. In terms of the mining process, a single Ethereum transaction emits 33.4 kilos of CO2, which is about equivalent to 7 to 4,000 Visa transactions. In comparison, the average NFT transaction has a carbon footprint of around 48 kilos of CO2 of Chapter 2 carbon footprint. 80,000 transactions involving 18,000 NFTs were investigated on the super rare NFT marketplace, which is now one of the more popular and vacant markets. The typical footprint of a single NFT transaction, including minting bids, sales, and transfers, is 82 kilowatt hours with outputs of 48 kilos of carbon. This is more than double the price of a standard Ethereum blockchain trend. A single NFT can encompass many transactions, such as minting bids, canceling sales, and transferring ownership, and separating the footprint by transaction type. In actuality, the typical NFT has a 340 kilowatt footprint. or 211 kilos of carbon from the 18,000 NFTs available on the super rare market. A single NFT footprint is equivalent to a month's worth of total electric power use for a European resident with emissions, or the equivalent of driving 1,000 kilometers or flying for 2 hours. It's also vital to understand that every time an NFT is formed or sold, a new transaction is initiated. Consider the cost of a single edition NFT with its energy use of 340 kilowatt hours and its carbon emissions of 21 kilos. A single artist would very certainly sell many NFTs, which will multiply those figures. 67% of the 633 artists on Super Rare had NFTs with a carbon dioxide footprint larger than 1 ton. Despite the fact that half of the artists had only joined the platform in the preceding 6 months, 18% of the artists' NFTs had a carbon footprint of more than 10 tons. This equates to 12 transatlantic flights or a 5-year supply of power for Europe. This is extraordinarily unusual. An artist's NFT's average footprint is 10 megawatt hours and 6 tons of carbon dioxide. This is more than double the price of a standard Ethereum blockchain trend. A single NFT can encompass many transactions, such as minting bids, canceling sales, and transferring ownership, and separating the footprint by transaction type. In actuality, the typical NFT has a 340 kilowatt footprint, or 211 kilos of carbon from the 18,000 NFTs available on the super rare market. A single NFT footprint is equivalent to a month's worth of total electric power use for a European resident with emissions, or the equivalent of driving 1,000 kilometers or flying for 2 hours. It's also vital to understand that every time an NFT is formed or sold, a new transaction is initiated. Consider the cost of a single edition NFT with its energy use of 340 kilowatt hours and its carbon emissions of 21 kilos. A single artist would very certainly sell many NFTs, which will multiply those figures. 67% of the 633 artists on Super Rare had NFTs with a carbon dioxide footprint larger than 1 ton. Despite the fact that half of the artists had only joined the platform in the preceding 6 months, 18% of the artists' NFTs had a carbon footprint of more than 10 tons. This equates to 12 transatlantic flights or a 5-year supply of power for Europe. This is extraordinarily unusual. An artist's NFT's average footprint is 10 megawatt hours and 6 tons of carbon dioxide, whereas the median is 3 megawatt hours and 2 tons of CO2. The typical NFT footprint is similar to a European resident's energy use for 3 years, driving 30,000 kilometers in a gasoline-powered automobile or taking a 57-hour flight. To gain a sense of the wider picture, consider all of the NFTs recorded on Super Rare and their cumulative influence on the ecosystem. The results are mind-boggling. The total amount of NFTs on Super Rare at the moment is 18,159. The environmental cost of keeping track of all of this equates to a total energy consumption of 6.15 million kilowatt hours, or around 6 gigatons of electricity and 3.8 metric tons of CO2. This is the equivalence to a single individual in Europe consuming 2,000 years' worth of electrical energy, or driving for 20 million kilometers, or even flying for 37,000 hours. Keep in mind that these figures are only for one of several NFT markets, and they are also based on figures from the start of the NFT venture. The primary reason for blockchain's high energy consumption as a theory in Bitcoin is that they employ a consensus method known as proof of work. Proof of work is a great mechanism for verifying data integrity. However, as the worldwide usage of blockchains based on proof of work technology grows, so too does the power used by miners to validate the data. Other blockchain variations that enable NFTs, such as Tasers, Symbol, and Polygon, all employ an upgraded proof of stake method that does not require a huge amount of computational power and hence consumes less electricity. However, there is good news for Ethereum fans. ETH 2.0, a greener proof of stake update for the present Ethereum environment, is in the works. Ethereum intends to reduce the expenses as well as the environmental effect of not only NFTs, but the Ethereum blockchain as a whole, by up to 99.9% with an 8% carbon offsets. Another approach is to use carbon offsets. A carbon offset is a payment you make to help fund a project that reduces carbon emissions, such as developing solar power plants to reduce the use of fossil fuels or removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, such as planting forest trees. The number of offsets you can purchase can theoretically match the number of carbon emissions you produce. However, the two can be canceled out. Although they appear to be a suitable solution, experts warn that they should only be used when there are no other options because carbon emissions might take decades to offset. You now have a better understanding of how NFTs affect the environment and can make an informed decision about whether you support or oppose their usage. Remember that whether the blockchain employs proof of work or proof of stake, power consumption isn't the only thing that adds to its carbon and environmental footprint. As the number of Bitcoin miners and stakers rises, more computer gear is utilized, which has its own industrial and extractive implications. As a result, the overall carbon footprint of organizations is almost certain to be more than previously estimated. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to our channel so that we can keep generating more content like this. Thanks for watching.